Part 1. Chapter 1. Sherlock Holmes. In 1878, I graduated as a Doctor of Medicine from the University of London. I then moved to Netley to complete the required training for Army surgeons. Once finished, I was attached to the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers as an assistant surgeon. At the time, the regiment was stationed in India. Before I could join them, the Second Afghan War broke out. I landed at Bombay and learned that my corps had already advanced deep into enemy territory. Along with several other officers in the same situation, I followed them. I managed to reach Kandahar safely, where I finally found my regiment and began my new duties. While the campaign brought honors and promotions to many, it brought me only misfortune. I was transferred from my brigade to the Berkshires, with whom I served at the disastrous Battle of Maiwand. During the fight, I was struck in the shoulder by a Jezzail bullet. It shattered the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. I would have fallen into the hands of the enemy if not for the courage of my orderly, Murray. He threw me across a pack horse and managed to bring me safely back to the British lines. Exhausted by pain and long hardships, I was transported with a large group of wounded soldiers to the base hospital at Peshawar. I began to recover and was soon strong enough to walk through the wards or sit on the veranda. However, I was then struck down by enteric fever, the curse of our Indian colonies. For months, my life was in danger. When I finally regained consciousness and began to recover, I was so weak and thin that a medical board decided I must return to England immediately. I was sent on the troop ship Orontes and landed a month later at Portsmouth. My health was ruined, but the government granted me 9 months to try and improve it. I had no family in England and was as free as air, or as free as an income of 11 shillings and sixpence a day allows a man to be. Naturally, I gravitated toward London, that great center where all the restless and idle of the empire eventually end up. I stayed at a private hotel in the Strand for a while, living a comfortless and meaningless life. I spent my money much more freely than I should have. Eventually, my finances became so alarming that I realized I had to either leave the city for the country or completely change my lifestyle. I chose the latter. I decided to leave the hotel and find a less expensive place to live. On the day I reached this conclusion, I was standing at the Criterion bar when someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was young Stamford, who had worked under me at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. Seeing a friendly face in the vast wilderness of London is a great comfort to a lonely man. We had never been close friends, but I greeted him with genuine enthusiasm, and he seemed delighted to see me as well. In my joy, I invited him to lunch at the Holborn, and we set off together in a hansom cab. "What have you been doing with yourself, Watson?" he asked in wonder as we drove through the crowded streets. "You're as thin as a rail and as brown as a nut." I gave him a brief summary of my adventures. I finished the story just as we reached our destination. "Poor fellow," he said sympathetically. "What are you doing now?" "Looking for a place to live," I replied. "I'm trying to find comfortable rooms at a reasonable price." "That's strange," my companion remarked. "You're the second person today to say that to me." "And who was the first?" I asked. "A guy working in the chemical laboratory at the hospital. This morning he was complaining that he couldn't find anyone to share some nice rooms he'd found. They were too expensive for him alone." "By Jove," I cried. "If he really wants someone to share the expense, I'm his man. I'd much rather have a roommate than live alone." Young Stamford looked at me strangely over his wineglass. "You don't know Sherlock Holmes yet," he said. "You might not want him as a constant companion." "Why? What's wrong with him?" Oh, I didn't say anything was wrong. He's just a bit unusual in his ideas, an enthusiast in certain branches of science. As far as I know, he's a decent enough fellow." "A medical student?" I asked. "No, I have no idea what his goals are. I believe he is excellent at anatomy and a first-class chemist, but he has never taken any systematic medical classes. His studies are eccentric and disorganized, but he has gathered a lot of specialized knowledge that would surprise his professors." "Did you ever ask him what he's studying for?" "No. He isn't easy to talk to, though he can be communicative when the mood strikes him." "I should like to meet him," I said. "If I am to live with someone, I'd prefer a man with quiet, studious habits. I'm not strong enough yet for noise or excitement. I had enough of both in Afghanistan to last a lifetime. How can I meet him?" "He's sure to be at the laboratory," Stamford replied. "He either avoids the place for weeks or works there from morning till night. If you like, we can drive there after lunch." "Certainly," I answered, and the conversation turned to other things. As we made our way to the hospital, Stamford gave me more details about the man. "Don't blame me if you don't get along," he warned. "I only know him from meeting him occasionally in the lab. Since you suggested this, I won't be held responsible." "If we don't get along, it will be easy to part ways," I replied. Then I looked at Stamford. "It seems to me you have a reason for wanting to stay out of this. Is his temper that bad? Don't be afraid to be honest." "It's hard to explain," he said with a laugh. "Holmes is a bit too scientific for my taste. It almost seems cold-blooded. I could imagine him giving a friend a small dose of a new poison, not out of malice, but simply out of curiosity to see the effects. To be fair, I think he would take it himself with the same readiness. He has a passion for exact knowledge." "That's a good trait." "Yes, but it can go too far. When it involves beating cadavers in the dissecting rooms with a stick, it gets rather bizarre." "Beating dead bodies?" "Yes, to test how far bruises can be produced after death. I saw him do it myself." "And yet you say he's not a medical student?" "No, heaven knows what he is studying, but here we are. You'll have to form your own opinion." We turned down a narrow lane and entered a side door of the great hospital. The setting was familiar to me. We walked up the stone staircase and down the long corridor toward the chemical laboratory. The lab was a large room filled with countless bottles. Broad, low tables were scattered around, covered with retorts, test tubes, and flickering Bunsen burners. Only one student was in the room, leaning over a distant table, absorbed in his work. At the sound of our steps, he looked around and sprang up with a cry of joy. "I found it! I found it!" he shouted, running toward us with a test tube. "I have found a reagent that reacts to hemoglobin and nothing else!" He looked as delighted as if he had discovered a gold mine. "Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes," Stamford said, introducing us. "How do you do?" Holmes said, cordially, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "You have been in Afghanistan, I see." "How on earth did you know that?" I asked in astonishment. "Never mind," he said, chuckling. "The question now is about hemoglobin. Do you see the significance of my discovery?" "It's interesting chemically, I'm sure," I answered, "but practically, why man, it's the most practical medical legal discovery in years. Don't you see it gives us an infallible test for bloodstains? Come here." He grabbed my sleeve and pulled me over to his table. "Let's get some fresh blood," he said, pricking his finger with a needle and drawing a drop into a pipette. "Now, I add this small amount of blood to a liter of water. You see, the mixture looks like pure water. The proportion of blood is less than 1 in a million. Yet I have no doubt we will get the reaction." He threw a few white crystals into the vessel and added some drops of transparent fluid. Instantly the liquid turned a dark mahogany color, and a brownish dust settled at the bottom. "Ha, ha," he cried, clapping his hands like a child with a new toy. "What do you think of that?" "It seems to be a very sensitive test," I remarked. "Beautiful. The old tests were clumsy and uncertain. Microscopic examination is also difficult, especially if the stains are old. This works whether the blood is old or new. If this test had existed before, hundreds of criminals would have been caught long ago." "Indeed," I murmured. "Criminal cases often depend on this one point. A man is suspected of a crime months after it happened. His clothes are examined and brown stains are found. Are they blood, mud, rust, or fruit? This has puzzled many experts because there was no reliable test. Now we have the Sherlock Holmes test, and there will be no more difficulty." His eyes shone as he spoke. He even placed his hand over his heart and bowed to an imaginary crowd. "Congratulations," I said, surprised by his enthusiasm. "There was the case of von Bischoff in Frankfurt last year. He would have been hanged if this test had existed. I could name 20 cases where it would have been decisive." "You seem to be a walking encyclopedia of crime," Stamford said with a laugh. "I have to be careful," Holmes continued, turning to me with a smile, "because I work with poisons a lot." He held out his hand, and I noticed it was stained with acids and covered in small bandages. "We came here on business," Stamford said, sitting on a high stool. "My friend here is looking for a place to live. Since you were complaining about not having a roommate, I thought I'd bring you together." Sherlock Holmes seemed delighted. "I have my eye on a suite in Baker Street," he said. "It would be perfect for us. You don't mind the smell of strong tobacco, I hope?" "I smoke ship's tobacco myself," I answered. "That's good. I usually have chemicals around and do experiments. Would that bother you?" "Not at all." "Let's see, what are my other flaws? I get depressed sometimes and don't speak for days. Don't think I'm being sulky. Just leave me alone, and I'll be fine. What about you? It's best to know the worst before we move in together." I laughed. "I have a bull pup," I said, "and I hate noise because my nerves are shaken. I get up at odd hours, and I am quite lazy. I have other vices, but those are the main ones for now." "Do you count violin playing as noise?" he asked anxiously. "It depends on the player," I replied. "A good violin is a treat, a bad one—" "Oh, that's fine," he cried with a laugh. "I think we can consider it settled, if you like the rooms." "When shall we see them?" "Meet me here at noon tomorrow. We'll go together and settle everything." "All right, noon exactly," I said, shaking his hand. We left him at his work and walked toward my hotel. "By the way," I asked Stamford suddenly, "how did he know I'd come from Afghanistan?" Stamford smiled mysteriously. "That's just his way. A lot of people want to know how he finds things out." "A mystery, then?" I said, interested. "I'm glad we met. The proper study of mankind is man, after all." "You'll find him a difficult problem to solve, though," Stamford said as we said goodbye. "I bet he learns more about you than you do about him." I continued to my hotel, very interested in my new acquaintance.